Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's ViDevo. This morning we are in Mark chapter 11, picking up right where we left off last Sunday in verse 11. And though, a lot of times when you read Jesus' teachings in the Bible, he uses what we call parables. In other words, stories with lots of symbolism or metaphors to make a spiritual point. But in our passage today, he's going to be kind of a living parable. Check this out here, starting in verse 11. So we read Sunday about how he entered Jerusalem. And so verse 11 says, Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. When evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. We'll plan to pick it up there Thursday. Okay, so what is that all about, you may be wondering? Well, basically, if you read the first 5 books of the entire Bible, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, one of the things you'll read about are the kind of prescriptions for how to worship God under the Old Covenant, the Old Agreement with him. And part of that prescription was to bring him animal sacrifices to kind of make up for sin or other things like that. So at the time of Jesus, as people are still following those religious rituals and such, sometimes when people would come to Jerusalem on a trip for Passover or whatever reason to worship at the temple, they wouldn't bring animals with them to sacrifice. They'd wait till they got there and then purchase them. So these vendors tried to make it easier for them, I guess, and just set up little pens and selling booths right in the temple courts. Also, travelers like today wouldn't necessarily have the local money, so they could even trade their money, again, in the temple courts right there, which ironically was a far cry from what else the Old Testament said about keeping things like the temple as a sacred, holy place, something set apart from the rest of the world. Because while God certainly does have a sense of humor, we also need to remember that he is holy, and we need to honor and reverence that holiness. And when he commands something, we need to take that seriously, obviously, based on how Jesus responds to their disobedience. That's also the point of the fig tree part that we read about, in case you're kind of wondering what that was about. Jesus was looking for fruit on the tree, just like he was looking for spiritual fruit among his people. He was looking for results, for them to follow him. And he didn't find fruit in either case, right? Which was not okay with him, because Jesus is holy and needs to be honored as such. That's why we try so hard to do exactly that at SCC. Like we say every so often, we don't take ourselves too seriously, because that can lead to pride issues and lots of issues, but we do strive to take God seriously and to follow what he commands out of love for him. Like even here, when Jesus says, basically, don't turn his Father's house into a market. He actually uses those exact words in the book of John when he throws people out of the temple for the same thing. Don't turn my Father's house into a market. Keep it as a place of worship. It's not a shopping center. That's why, if you notice, one of our policies at SEC is to never sell things at church. And we give stuff away, but we never sell things. Why? Because of this passage. We want to honor Jesus in what he says. And what he says seems pretty clear to me there. Honestly, I don't understand this modern trend that churches have where they build a coffee shop or a bookstore in their building. I mean, maybe I'm missing something here, but Jesus seems pretty clear on this one, right? So today, despite what's popular, despite what maybe even religious people may tell you is, oh, that's okay, man, if Jesus says something different, go with him. It's him we're here to honor. It's him we follow. He's holy, and we need to honor that.